Miami Heat Media Day is just a few days away. You have questions, and we'll answer them as we launch our first of 3 episodes talking about which player needs to step up, which player will surprise us the most, and the biggest stories to start the season. It's 5 burning questions, training camp edition on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Wednesday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or in your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. Heat training camp just a few days away. We'll be ramping up our coverage, asking the big questions you need answers to. So make sure to subscribe to the show to ensure you get everything you need every day. But today is our first of 3 5 burning questions episodes, training camp edition. We're going to be asking the big questions that you'll have regarding which players have to step up. And we'll start off with this first question. Is Kyle Lowry in shape? That's the question. Now, we're going to try and do something a little different. We're going to give ourselves a time limit to answer these questions. So, Wes, I'll kick it off to you. Is Kyle Lowry going to be in shape to start off the season?
So I'm going to start the 5-minute timer right now as we get through these 5 different questions. Will Kyle Lowry be in shape? I hope so, right? Based on all of the Instagram stuff that we've been seeing, everything going on social media, it looks like Kyle Lowry is really taking his conditioning seriously. And maybe you could credit that to Pat Riley, just basically calling him out at the end of the season during his press conference that he does annually. I think that's certainly part of it. I also think Kyle Lowry recognizes that last year was a little bit of a disappointment for him. We know that he had the personal things happening off the court, but even without that, this is a guy who still got injured in the playoffs, right? He wasn't 100% by the time the postseason rolled around. And who knows? If Kyle Lowry was the Kyle Lowry that they hoped that they would have and the Kyle Lowry that we saw, kind of in January, February, maybe the Heat do beat the Celtics. Maybe the Heat are playing in the NBA Finals, right? And so they need Kyle Lowry to step up. He recognizes that. He called last season a failure, right? Even without Pat Riley saying anything, he called last season a failure because he's saying it's championship or bust at this point for him in his career. And so I do think that Kyle Lowry is going to come back in shape, motivated to make sure that his second year in Miami is much better than the first one.
I agree 100%. I think, first of all, I don't think that he was vastly out of shape either. This is just who Kyle is. And if you bring up this question to our Raptors fans, oh boy, prepare yourself, because they think that we don't appreciate Kyle Lowry here in South Florida the way he's beloved in Toronto by Raptors fans. So they have a special place in their hearts for Kyle Lowry. It's just Heat fans have turned on him in a way that I did not expect, considering the kinds of things that he was going through. The fact that he is 35, 36 at the end of the last season, that he is a little bit older. He was going through those injuries and still played as well as possible. Still a very, very good point guard. And again, yes, to your point, he did show flashes.
That's not the alarm. That was just my fiance calling me. We still have 2 minutes.
I see. All right, good to know. All right, so now we're getting regular sounds chiming in throughout the podcast. I like that one better than the timer, though. The crickets, I guess.
The timer still is a little PTSD. Makes you think you're late for something. To your point, when Kyle Lowry was in Toronto, this was sort of his pattern. You look at his stats over the course of his whole career. He's always been good, but ever since he basically became a starter. But you still have good Kyle Lowry, and then you have like that all-star level Kyle Lowry. And it's always 1 year on, 1 year off, it seems, it just throughout his career. So whatever happened in Miami last year is not an admiration. It is sort of how Kyle Lowry goes. It's 1 year on, 1 year off. And when I say off, again, he's a solid point guard. He's one of the better point guards in the league over the last decade. But then he'll always come back with another great year. And that's the way it was in 2019 when the Raptors won the finals. Obviously, Kawhi, Pascal Siakam blossomed into a high-level role player for them. But it was also a really great Kyle Lowry season, too. And so I think this is just sort of what happens. You have Kyle Lowry at sort of baseline Kyle Lowry, and then he'll kind of follow that up with all-star Kyle Lowry. And I think the Heat are hoping that that's the case.
Yeah, and I would also temper expectations if you're a Heat fan, too. Not just because he's 36 or he might be out of shape. None of those things I think are going to be the factor that a lot of people expect it to. It's just he's not that kind of productive player. He's not going to put up an average of 30 points per game. He is a star. He is a Hall of Fame level player.
What do they need from him?
18 and 8 18 and 8.
That's fair. I like it. With like maybe a 1.7 steals per game, something like that.
Yeah, he'll force
And then
turnovers the way he always has. He plays defense at a high level. I mean, he uses that body to guard bigs. He's switchable. He's still a very valuable defender. And we saw that even throughout the playoffs when he was nursing injuries. So I think you're going to get solid contributions from him across the board, but you're going to get an uptick in offense in terms of his passing and his playmaking and shooting.
That's all they need. They don't need him to be Jimmy Butler level scoring. They don't need him to be Tyler Herro level scoring, right? I think those will probably be your top two scorers. They probably want something more from Bam, which we'll talk about actually right now.
All right. Well, we made it under the timer there. No crickets necessary. The second question comes in. Can Bam Adebayo evolve on offense? So much of what Miami is looking to do over the course of the season, I think, depends on Bam Adebayo. We think we know what we're going to get from Jimmy Butler, although we'll talk about that over the course of the next couple of days. But Bam Adebayo ranked 21st according to ESPN and their rankings of the top 100 players in the NBA. Bam coming in at 21st, so high expectations for him. Certainly a high impact player with his defense, a defensive player of the year candidate, and I'm going on a limb and saying he will win the defensive player of the year award. I'm getting that bandwagon started now, so jump on whenever possible. But aside from that, we need to see him evolve on offense. We need to see him stretch the floor. We need to see an uptick in his playmaking ability, even with Kyle on the floor there. What's his evolution like on offense, in your opinion?
I think it's exactly what Pat Riley laid out again. You look at Bam last year, 12 to 13 shots per game. Pat Riley said we need to give him 15 quality looks a game. And so that would be an uptick. That's the whole thing with Bam is he needs to ratchet up that level of aggression, that level of, you know what? I'm going to go out and score 28 points tonight. I'm going to be the dude tonight, because as we know, Jimmy Butler just can't do it every night. You can't ask Tyler Herro to do it every night. Certain matchups call for Bam Adebayo to be that guy, and we've seen it. That's the thing, David, is we've seen him do it. It'd be one thing if he was just always kind of putting together, 18 to 20 points or something like that with a bunch of assists and a bunch of rebounds and playing great defense. But we've seen him score 30 points. We've seen him do it. And when he is tapped into whatever that is, it almost seems effortless. And that's the crazy part, right? Look, 15 quality shots a game. He's kind of got that 10-footer nailed. I'd like to see him stretch the floor, like you said, to 15 to 18 feet. I think Heat fans expecting him to come out and be Chris Bosh 2.0 and start shooting threes. You just don't see him going from basically taking 0 3-pointers an entire season within the flow of the offense to then averaging 1 to 2 a game. I don't see that happening. But can he extend that range to that longer mid-range area? Just that, going from like 10 feet to 17 feet creates another 7 feet of space for Jimmy Butler and Lowry and Tyler Herro and all these other guys. So that to me is what that looks like. And continuing to just get to the foul line too. No PJ Tucker this year, right? And so you're going to have Bam Adebayo a little bit more involved in the screen and roll game, I think, because PJ was such an important screener for this team that I think Bam's going to have to do that a little bit more this coming season.
8 of 15 from the field on a nightly basis. That's 16 points right there, because we don't expect Bam to be taking 3-pointers, although I would expect the occasional 3-point shot from him over the course of the season. But 8 of 15, it's certainly possible considering how many good looks he gets around the rim and how he uses his athletic explosiveness to be able to dunk over opponents. So that's 16 points, 5 to 6 free throws per game. We're looking at 21, 22 points per game score. That's great. And there's going to be variations on that. There's going to be nights where he goes 4 of 15. There's going to be nights where he goes 10 of 15. And given that, we're going to see an increased, improved version of Bam Adebayo. You're right, just taking more shots. And now, the only counter to that I say is that Bam is and has always been a very, very good playmaker. And there's that split second there where he's trying to gauge and read the defense and seeing what players are cutting, where the movement comes from as he tries to set up an opponent. There's a lot of that. I'm sorry, a teammate. There's a lot of that goes on around the Heat. Jimmy Butler, a great playmaker. Lowry, a great playmaker. Even Herro to a certain extent. Maybe he's the most trigger happy in that sense, where he's like looking to take his shot first and foremost, and then he'll make a play for somebody else along the way. Bam's wired differently. He's not going to be that guy who takes those shots. And so there's that moment there where he could take a shot, and he does it because he's trying to get a good look for somebody else. I wonder if that's going to change. I wonder if we're going to see a decrease in his passing as he just continues to be a more aggressive shooter and scorer over the course of the season.
Like you said, you've got 3 guys who are almost unselfish to an extreme degree. One of them just can't, like all 3 of them can't be that, and that's time.
BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchup news, and podcasts. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Who the Dolphins take on this week? I know they had a good game on Sunday.
It's Buffalo Bills. I think they're, last time I checked, a 6.5-point underdog.
An underdog to the Buffalo Bills. Oh, how times have
Bills
changed.
are the Super Bowl favorites, Dave.
I had no idea. It's been a long time, but I can't believe the Bills. Are the Bills that good? Actually, I can't.
They look great. They've covered, I think, the first 2 weeks. Josh Allen might win MVP, but hey, we've got Tua. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was following somewhat along via Twitter because I know it was a big game on Sunday, and then all of a sudden they were down by 21. I'm thinking to myself, oh, same old Dolphins. I was disappointed on Saturday after the Hurricanes
Texas,
failed to show up there. But then Tua saved the day. So kind of saved the weekend for football fans here in South Florida. But the fastest and easiest way to check out all your favorite sports and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf, and so much more, head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. Bet online where the game starts. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Just a reminder, you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. Well, I referenced the ESPN ranking of the top 100 players, and while Bam Adebayo came in at 21, Jimmy Butler, his teammate, came just a few places below that at 17. So this question going into training camp, is Jimmy Butler really the 17th best player in the NBA? It's not necessarily a training camp question, and I don't think that this is going to be the kind of thing that motivates Jimmy at this point in his career. The only thing that motivates Jimmy is the pursuit of a title. But is he really the 17th best player in the NBA? Because, well, I have to say, I don't agree with that ranking.
It is a little bit of a training camp question, though, because if Jimmy Butler is the 17th best player in the NBA, then the Heat have to make up for that in some way, and they have to try to figure that out, I guess, in training camp, because last year he was playing as one of the best 10 players in the NBA minimum, and that's what helped get them to the Eastern Conference Finals. So if he's 17, then yeah, the Heat are much worse. And look, I understand where the ESPN rank is trying to come from, right? They're projecting what the players, not what they are now, but what they will be this coming season. And I guess because of Jimmy Butler's age, maybe they're assuming a decline. You look at the players in front of him: Trae Young, Paul George, Damian Lillard, Karl Anthony Towns, Kawhi Leonard, James Harden, all great players. In the instance of Trae Young and Kat, those are young players ascending, right? Jimmy Butler, I don't think you could say is ascending right now. Paul George and Kawhi, I guess the idea is, hey, bounce back from injuries. They play 60-plus games. They're going to be right there in the mix. James Harden, a full season in Philadelphia. Damian Lillard, obviously injured for most of last season. He comes back. I think he's deserving of a top 15 placement too. But Jimmy Butler 17 to me is a little disrespectful. And I'll shout out CBS because CBS did the same thing, CBS Sports, and they had Jimmy Butler ranked at 10. I think we're going to see this as these rankings start to come out. Jimmy Butler, it's so much eye of the beholder with him. Do you believe he's more sort of regular season coasting the way he was last year? Or do you think can still tap into what he was able to do in the playoffs last year? And by the way, what we saw in the bubble too. If you think that he could do it again, you're going to have Jimmy Butler closer to 10. If you don't think he's going to do it again, if you think he's tailing off and he's at the end of his prime, then you're probably going to have him somewhere where ESPN had him at 17. But I'm with you, man. Like, that seems really low to me. That seems really low to me coming from what he just did in the playoffs, and especially in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Ranked 16th, and I will just tease this as far as the Locked On NBA top 50 players, according to BetOnline. Now, that's a different ranking. That's a ranking not just of the best players, but who bettors and BetOnline view as the most likely to move the needle in terms of a bet on any one game on a night-to-night basis. Well, let me just tell you, Jimmy Butler ranks a little bit higher than 17, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But also, in terms of the overall ranking, he was ranked 16th last year. And I get it in the sense that, like, Jimmy is not that electric a player.
He was ranked 16th in ESPN rank last year, and after the season he just had, they dropped him to 17?
Well, remember, it was also the time after getting swept out by the
I get it, but you would think ESPN was
Brent
like, well, Forbes, 16, and he bounced back, and he was awesome, and now we're going to drop him to 17? Like, I understand all this is within the context, and you're trying to move guys up and down, but geez.
Yeah, it's the Bryn Forbes factor last year. I don't know what it could be last year, except for another year under his belt and the possibility of age. But I think the overall argument could be made that maybe He's not the electric player during the regular season because I don't think it matters to him to put up 30, 40 points per game. All he wants to do is win, and he won a lot last year. He's won a lot the year before. He won a lot the year before that, too. He's just that good. He'll make the little plays. And that's the thing, too. You're looking at a 25, 28 point per game scorer in Karl-Anthony Towns, a guy who doesn't do any actual contribution to overall winning on a night-to-night basis. And I think that's where the rankings come into place. Maybe that's a little harsh
on Cat, but I understand where you're coming from. I'll say this. Look, there's a statistical analysis factor here, right? Like if Jimmy Butler just averages 21 points a game again, I understand why you can't rank him higher than 17. I get it. But are there 10 players? Are there 16 players you would rather have on your team in a playoff than Jimmy Butler? No, not at all. And that's our time. Next question.
Yeah, that's all we need to answer. We'll take a break here and move on. And we'll answer some more questions about offseason friction and who takes the biggest leap this season here on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure to stay tuned for that Locked On NBA Top 50 ranking, as I mentioned before. A great list of the best players in the NBA and the way they impact betting lines and who is among the top 10. Well, perhaps a Heat player will be there as well. But we'll take this question on now because I think there's a lot of concerns about what happened last season, actually, when we saw that blow up on the sideline. And of course, Miami put it in the rearview mirror. We're able to progress, move forward. They had a lot of veteran leadership with PJ Tucker, with Kyle Lowry, with Jimmy, etc. Eric Spoelstra, of course, weathering the road as well as he ever has. And then, you hear about these trade rumors: Kevin Durant, Donovan Mitchell, ex-player, ex-superstar. We need to get better. We need to improve this roster. How does that impact this roster moving forward? Will offseason friction carry over through camp, Wes? Because I tend to think that those things do. Like you cannot put these things behind you. I know we're going to hear canned answers from Tyler Herro, Duncan Robinson, and everybody else. Even Duncan, I think over the course of the offseason, finally admitted the pressure of the contract may have been a factor last season. But during the course of the regular season, even during the optimism of media day, everything's going to be hunky-dory, right? No, it's a business. I understand that. Bullcrap. They all get impacted by it. They all get motivated. They all get hurt by it. This is the team that drafted you, that gave you a chance to show out in the league, that has taught you everything you need to know about professional basketball, and yet they'll cast you aside as quickly as possible in order to get an upgrade. So I think these things will be an impact. Let me get your take on it.
Sure. Well, first of all, does Tyler Herro get that extension? Because that's going to be hovering over his head during all of training camp. The Heat have until the beginning of the season to get that extension done. There's no indication that they're going to do it in training camp. Who knows? It's Wednesday as we're recording this, Wednesday afternoon, David, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's still time before training camp begins to get it done. Maybe the Heat front office wants to get something done before the reporters start asking questions on media today. But then again, Miami's front office doesn't really operate in that way. They haven't really shown like that they care about whether or not the media is peppering questions to these players. They're going to do it on their own timeline. Still, I think it would behoove the Heat's front office, because of how often Tyler Herro has been in trade rumors, not just this summer, David, but like this is basically his whole career at this point. Get something done. If you really want something done, I'll say that. Get it done now. I see no reason why not to do it. I can't imagine how complicated that this is. We kind of know he's going to get an extension, if he does get one, around the $20 to $25 million a year range. Just get it done. But if they don't get it done, I think that will hang over him during training camp. Duncan Robinson, he knows that he's in trade rumors. He knows that he's the only salary that could be moved in order to acquire, a starting power forward or a rotation caliber player. He knows that. He gets it. And so I think that's going to be hovering over his head. Not just that, but also the fact that he was out of the rotation last playoffs, right? After starting at shooting guard to start the season, completely out of the rotation. He's going to want to prove himself too. Maybe that's going to be hanging over his head during training camp. All of that is going to be a factor.
Absolutely. I'll add to that the fact that you've got two heavy rotation players in Max Strus and Gabe Vincent that are on a contract here.
Yes.
You don't think that's going to be a motivating factor? I mean, you have
maybe not in training camp, but I do think for the season, right? Because they're not really. I don't know if that they're extension eligible, right? So I think, but I will say this too. Is this like the last year of this experiment, right? This Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry window, basically. It's Udonis Haslem's last year in the league. I do wonder if they fail, that Miami doesn't look to maybe move off of some of the older players on this roster, because maybe not Jimmy Butler, but Kyle Lowry and these kinds of things too, because I don't know how much longer their window is going to be open. And so if they fail this offseason, or I'm sorry, if they fail this season, next offseason could be, I wouldn't say blow it up level, David, but it could be an offseason of much more change than we saw this last offseason.
Yes and no. I tend to disagree. I just think you're committed to Jimmy for the long term now because of the contract extension he got. He's going to be making near $50 million a year. That's not exactly the movable contract that a lot of people might think it is. And on top of that, Kyle would have to really, really underperform to get to that point where they're going to look to trade him. And if that's the case at 37, who's going to take that contract too? Right. So I don't think there's a lot of takers. You can convince yourself that Westbrook could be a player. They found a way to move John Wall because, again, he could always come back healthy. At Kyle's age, I just don't see that being a movable contract. I think you're kind of stuck in this version moving forward. But that's the timer. That's all we have to say about that. But anyway, this last question, who needs to take the biggest leap? Expectations for this team are high, tempered to some degree, and yet the hope is that they'll find a way to be able to eclipse last year's deep playoff run, get past the Eastern Conference Finals, and somehow wind up in the NBA Finals. Who can take the biggest leap in order to get Miami to that promised land?
Who can? I guess any of these young guys. Who needs to?
Or who needs to?
It's Bam Adebayo and it's Tyler Herro, and that's the end of the list. Now, we could talk about the fun, Caleb Martin, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Omer Yurtseven. We could do all of that, but the only people who care about that are people in Miami, or Heat fans and the Miami Heat themselves, because those are bit players. At the end of the day, they have a very limited ceiling. Tyler Herro, his ceiling is what? All-star? Yeah. Bam Adebayo, same thing. Those are the guys who can carry this team. That if they develop in a way that is substantial and meaningful, then that is the only development that matters for the Miami Heat, right? You need to have Jimmy Butler playing at a level that's probably better than 17th in the NBA. Sure. You need Kyle Lowry to bounce back, as we've already discussed. But at the end of the day, this franchise will go as far as Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo can take them, because they're the young guys. They're the lottery picks. They're the guys with the most natural talent, the most naturally gifted players on this roster. And the Heat are going to need much more from Tyler Herro, specifically on defense. And we already discussed, I think, on Tuesday, whether or not he'll end up in the starting lineup. We're talking about training camp questions, David. They're going to need to see signs of another big leap. After he took a big leap last year, they're going to need signs of another big leap in training camp, in the Bahamas. They're going to have to see it. Bam Adebayo, same thing, man. We saw videos of you taking threes, of you working on your jumper. Is that legit? Were you doing it just against chairs, or can you do it in training camp against your teammates? We'll see. Those are the leaps that have to happen.
Yeah, I'm listening to you talk about this, and you're absolutely right. I wonder, as the young players in the future, right? Everybody's talked about this, them being future cornerstones of the team, and we even just addressed, how much longer can this window with Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry exist? How can they navigate those really precarious waters of saying, we still defer to the vets, we still have to find a way to put them up on a pedestal and get them their numbers, but also find a way to take over? It's not an easy job, and yet we know that they need to do something more than they were able to accomplish, at least individually last year. But I'll add another name to that mix, and that's somebody who's been fighting through injury for a couple of seasons and is on another one-year prove-it deal, and that's Victor Oladipo. I mean, the leap isn't that much because, well, he didn't really show much during the 8 games he played during the regular season last year. We saw some flashes here and there during the course of the postseason, but yet if he can take that leap and become, I think it's unrealistic to say he's going to return to all-star form. The dynamics are different. This isn't his team. He's a tertiary, quaternary player. He's just not the man on this team the way he was in Indiana or anywhere else. And so if he could just take that leap and become a functional, consistent defender, a better shooter from the perimeter, and still have that explosiveness to get to the rim, then Miami's title hopes become a lot better. And I know I've seen some recent quotes from scouts and things of that sort saying, you know what? If Victor Oladipo can be that player, all of a sudden Miami has a legitimate championship aspiration this year. And I think Victor can get them there because he's that good a player when he's in peak form.
Yeah, I mean, he's the 3-and-D kind of guy that they've been looking for, a guy who can basically plug in any spot in any lineup and unlock Miami's most interesting and maybe most functional lineups too. It's a good name. I probably should have included it too. You're right. Victor Oladipo needs to take a leap. And like you said, I mean, the bar is pretty low, right? Not to dismiss what he did in the playoffs or anything like last year, but he played, 20, 30 games in total? Yeah. He hasn't really played a full healthy season in 4 years. This is his first training camp as a member of the Miami Heat, which is crazy to think about, but it's absolutely true. And so what does he look like going into training camp? Because one of the things that he had an issue with specifically during the regular season was the fact that he just didn't have a defined role. He was in the rotation when he got back, then he was pulled back out of the rotation when they needed to free up Jimmy Butler a little bit more to do stuff offensively. In training camp, can he take that leap and earn that defined role that he is craving? That is a big question.
Yeah, and there it is. That's the timer. We nailed it today, buddy.
Yep.
And I'm looking forward to answering even more questions over the next couple of days. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Thanks again to everybody for making Locked On Heat your first listen. Now go and make the NBA Top 50 on Locked On NBA your second listen. Which NBA player moves the betting line the most this season? Locked On and the BetOnline's Odd Makers present the NBA Top 50 most valuable players. You can find it on Locked On NBA wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.